The only thing that we're interested in is putting money in your wallet. If you want to bet the fights, if you want to have a little bit of action, you are in the right place. With my partner, Ian Parker, I am Brett Okamoto.
We're ready to rock between our parlays, our props, our straight picks. It's time to make money. Let's go.
Welcome into fabulous New York City. The UFC has not been here since the BMF title fight between Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal, and tonight we will see maybe the new BMF guy, depending on who you ask. Kamaru Usman says that's his belt because he has defeated Jorge Masvidal twice in the time since we have been in this building. I am Brett Okamoto, next to my partner, Ian Parker. We are here, of course, for UFC 268, a stacked card, man. I mean, the second that they put this card together, people were just salivating over this card, man. And now here we are finally. Ian, what are you looking forward to this evening?
Being in Madison Square Garden for the return is just something special in itself. But, man, top to bottom, action-packed. Anyone who's come into this fight and spent the money on these tickets, I think get here early. Don't miss a prelim. Don't miss anything. Fireworks the entire time.
For sure. Well, we're going to get through all of the fights here at UFC 268. But before we do, let's take a quick look back at UFC 267. Feels like it was months ago to me. I was in Abu Dhabi enjoying, obviously, New York this week. Ian gave us 3 best bets, and he did pretty good. We got Amanda Ribas. She cashed at -160. She did give us a little bit of a sweat there in the opening round, but then took care of business the final 2. Magomed Ankalaev got the win, but did not get a finish, which is what Ian was relying on at +100. That was his only miss. And then Khamzat Chimaev, making that look easy, -175. That should have been about -5 billion there for Khamzat Chimaev. I don't think we're going to get those odds on Chimaev anymore, -175.
We talked about it. Take advantage while we could right then and there. Even the plus submission odds were good. And, you know, Amanda Ribas made us sweat a little bit, and then Chimaev just brought it home for us, and there was no issue. So sometimes it makes up for it.
Yep, that was an easy one. Well, UFC 268, let's get into the early prelims. There's 5 of them to take a look at here. Spread out across different weight classes, and some big favorites on this card, on the early prelims portion at least, Ian. So I'm excited to see how you are going to try to get us to the window with, 3 close to 300, -400, 4-1 favorites. So you've got your work cut out for you. Let's start at the 135-pound division. Ode Osborne taking on CJ Vagata. Where are you going on this play?
I'm going to go with Ode Osborne here. I think this is a guy who's very good everywhere. Even his fight against Manel Cape, in my opinion, he was winning, and Cape is a really tough challenge for anybody in the division. He got caught with a flying knee. It happens. We've seen it. Guys bounce back. He's fighting a guy in CJ Vergara who's making his debut. Missed weight. Not a great start. You know, he looked good in the Contender Series, but the guy he fought was nowhere near what Osborne fought. I thought that he should be a bigger favorite. So this number right now, I'm going with Ode.
Okay, moving on to 145. This is one of those big favorites. Bruno Sosa. He's coming in at +280, taking on Melsik Baghdasaryan, another guy who missed weight in Sousa. What do you think about this fight?
You know what? For me, I think Melsik is. We haven't seen enough of him yet to be this big of a favorite. I understand Sousa missed weight. I totally understand. But for me, we're going to go in the over here of 2.5 rounds. I don't think either guy gets finished. I do think Melsik will dominate however he wants to do it. I just think Sousa's a tough guy to put away. So if you're going to bet this, for me, we're going to go over.
Okay, taking the over there. Moving up to 205-pound division. Dustin Jacoby, 15-5-1, taking on John Allen, who's 13-6. John Allen, a big underdog at +300. What do you like in this fight?
Look, John Allen's a tough guy. We've seen him strike. We've seen him get off his back. And as an underdog, he's really performed really well. However, I just think Dustin Jacoby is one of those guys that once he's been back in the UFC, he's taking on every challenge, and his striking is kind of second to none where they're at in the division. So for me, I think he gets it done by TKO or KO. Even on short notice, I just think that his striking is levels above John Allen.
Okay, so he's -380, but you're taking him by TKO KO. I believe that's +100 on
Yeah,
that?
we're going to get some even money right there.
All right, well, there's a nice, that's definitely better than -380 against John Allen. Jean Volante. Saying this is gonna be his final fight. The guy is at heavyweight, and he's every bit heavyweight. And he's taking on Chris Barnett, who's also a big guy in his own right. Jean coming in at -130 on his walkaway fight. What do you think?
How do you not love Jean Volante? Whether he is every bit of 260 or not, smiling on the scale, even as a retirement fight. But you know he's going to bring the fight. This is someone who still comes in here. Even though he should wrestle, he's not going to. This is going to be a very sloppy brawl. Both guys are tough. You know, you got Big Volante versus Huggy Bear. For me, and I know this sounds crazy for the heavyweights based on what we saw, but over 1.5. These guys are both difficult to finish. And I think Volante, until both guys gas later on, we'll get to see the second round here. So we're going to go there.
So we're taking the over, where both guys are going to gas, and we're going to see a long, sloppy brawl, Ian believes, in that heavyweight fight.
And that's okay sometimes. Sometimes it's fun.
Well, going from that fight to one that should have a whole lot of technique and a guy that a lot of people are excited to see in the UFC, that is Ian Gary. He fights out of Ireland, of course, a two-time Cage Warrior champion, so he's got a lot of pedigree. He's coming in as a big favorite in his UFC debut against Jordan Williams. Can you take Gary at this price, or is this just too high?
For me, it's too high. Again, this is, even though double champ and Cage Warriors, we've seen a lot of promise outside the organization, making his UFC debut, even though Jordan Williams has had a little bit of an up and down career so far. He does threaten with the wrestling, but for me, Ian Gary by TKO if you're going to play it.
Okay, well, moving right along, we get to the prelim portion. We've had the early prelims and now the prelim portion of UFC 268. And I got to say, man, this is a very, very fascinating portion of the card. You got Alex Pereira, who everybody's excited to see. You know, he's got that history with the middleweight champion, Israel Adesanya. Al Iaquinta is back. Bobby Green, I mean, how can you not love that fight? Phil Hawes is a big-time prospect at 185 pounds. And Edmund Shabazian, another big prospect who is looking to right the ship after a couple losses. So let's start with that fight. Edmund Shabazian versus Nasruddin Imavov. Pretty close odds here. Shabazian was kind of running away here. He was big-time favorite in some of these fights, didn't deliver, and now you can get him at even money. Are you taking him here?
This is a fight where I understand if everyone wants to stay away. However, because it leads off this part of the prelims, everyone's going to probably play it, right? So because of that reason, I'm going to go with Imavov here. I like what I've seen out of him so far. For me, I just haven't seen Shabazian make any improvements in his last fight against Hermansson. What did we see? The same thing. He was doing really well in the first round, and then the minute that cardio falls off, he gets out-grappled, and he loses. And in this fight, I just think Imavov brings a pace that if Edmund can't land early, unfortunately, I think this might be his third loss in a row. So if you're going to play this, I'm going to go with Imavov here until Edmund proves me otherwise.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, yeah, it's one of those times where I feel like, again, the way I set it up, because Shabazian has been such a big favorite, you almost want to take him now because you feel like all the steam is off. But I agree with your assessment of the matchup that Imavov may have some success later on in the fight. Let's talk about Phil Hawes. He was supposed to have this fight last month in Las Vegas. He refused to take the late notice opponent change. He gets Chris Curtis anyway a couple weeks later. What do you think of Phil Hawes here as a pretty sizable favorite, minus 330?
You know what? Hawes has the wrestling that he does utilize, but he's starting to fall in love with his hands a little bit too much. And against a guy in Chris Curtis who's got power, we've seen it in other organizations, he can get a knockout here. But for me, Phil Hawes is the play. I think he utilizes his wrestling. We've seen Curtis have trouble off his back. And if you put him on his back, it takes away the power. For me, I think Phil Hawes is one of those prospects that if he just, that cardio just gets better and better and his IQ gets a little bit higher and leans on the wrestling just a little bit more, this guy will be a problem in the division. At TKO at plus 100, I kind of like that. Yeah,
a lot of people agree with you there that Phil Hawes is going to be a problem in this division. He's facing a guy in Chris Curtis who does have a lot of experience. 34 professional fights to Phil Hawes' 13. Okay, how about Al Iaquinta? I was just so happy seeing him around this week. Right? He seems like he's in great spirits. He says he wants to be very active. He wants to get back to fighting. You know, I asked him how the real estate has been. Of course, everybody wants to know about the real estate. He said, I'm not even doing it. I'm in the gym, focused on this fight. I want to be more active. Facing a guy in Bobby Green who just takes on killer after killer after killer. He's competitive in each of them, it feels like. Al Iaquinta is actually the underdog here, plus 160. What do you think? You know what? If the Al Iaquinta in your interview is the guy we're getting in that cage, then at plus 160, that's a steal. This is a guy that took on Khabib short notice, per se, went all 5 rounds, didn't get taken out. And for me, Al is a guy who is extremely talented, very well-rounded, everywhere, can wrestle, heavy hands. To your point, though, Bobby Green is a problem. That last fight, no one thought he was going to last in the striking, and he stood up. He kept, and some people thought he won that fight. But for me, Al at plus 160 is too much to pass up. And if he's truly dedicated and he's done flipping houses and he's ready to get back and deliver some knockouts, Iaquinta's a solid underdog play right there. Yeah, I mean, Bobby Green is just one of those guys I hate betting against because he's just in every fight. But because of where the line is at, I agree with you. You got that plus 160 next to Al's name. Very, very attractive. Okay, let's get to the main event of the prelims, if you will. Alex Pereira making his UFC debut, 185 pounds against Andreas Mihalaides. Again, this guy has a history with Israel Adesanya, so of course that's who the fans are going to gravitate to. That's who the analysts are talking about. Is he worth the price here at minus 260? You know what, again, I like what he said. He said, I'm not even focused on Israel Adesanya. I wish people would forget about that because this is a whole new life for him. He's not kickboxing. He's now doing MMA full-time. You've heard from Glover Teixeira. This guy hits like an absolute truck, and he's going to be in his corner. At that number, it's tough, but look, how do you not go for a TKO or KO at minus 110? It's almost even money for a guy who's supposed to be an extreme knockout artist. He's one of the higher prospects we keep talking about. I think we're speaking a little too quickly about a potential rematch with Israel Adesanya here, but
I think he gets a knockout here tonight, and then we start building that steam for him. And this is a good play right here.
Yeah, maybe pump the brakes on a rematch with the champ.
Yeah,
but,
the champ.
I think the UFC knows what it's doing. They're putting him in a spot. Again, and the main event on those prelims, they want to give him the shine. They want to give him that opportunity. And we'll see if he takes advantage of it. I know that he's going to want to be, I mean, anybody in that position is going to want to kick things off with a knockout. So we've talked about 9 prelim fights. What is your top play, your top prelim bet for UFC 268?
I'm going to roll the dice on the future Ian Gary. I really like what I have seen out of him. His stand-up is excellent. He's got great takedown defense. And the guy in Jordan Williams, who just has not shown the highest level of IQ in there, he's very predictable with his wrestling after the first round. Gary by TKO, I think he makes a statement, and we might see the next quote-unquote future here. I don't know about double champ in the UFC, but I think he's every bit of that prospect that people keep talking about.
Yeah, I mean, he's got plenty of time to make a name for himself here, but he is coming in with some very big expectations. Okay, so that'll get us through UFC 268 prelims. Let's get to what we're really here for, Ian, and that is the UFC 268 main card. Just look at her, man. She is beautiful. You got Dustin Jacoby opening it up with Michael Chandler, Shane Burgos, who's never been in a boring fight, taking on Billy Corantillo, Frankie Edgar, the legend, fighting in his home state. Well, actually, New Jersey is his home state, but he calls New York, loves this man. You saw that at the weigh-ins. He's facing Cheeto, Vera, and then, of course, the 2 rematches in the title fights at the very top. Let's talk about Dustin Jacoby versus Michael Chandler. What is going to happen in this fight?
There's going to be some serious violence. There's going to be chaos. And you know what would be hilarious if Dustin Jacoby comes out and shoots a power double on Michael Chandler. But I'll bet you that doesn't happen.
I bet you that will not happen.
That would be funny, right? But it's not going to happen. Look, Dustin Gaethje's got the leg kicks here. I think his head's made of cement. He takes damage well. For Michael Chandler, if he does not land early or even threaten with wrestling, he's in trouble here. And with 3 rounds, that people say it might favor Chandler. For me, it favors Gaethje. The pace, the power, everything. Now, I really liked this when it was minus 185, minus 190. It is now minus 210. Bet at your discretion. I still like it here. I think Gaethje gets the win, and he goes on and potentially gets a title shot in the near future after this one.
Okay, you like it. You're not thinking a method here. What's keeping you off of a method in this fight?
You know what? Sometimes when these guys just go into a war, somehow they're able to last. I just think for Gaethje, he hasn't fought in a little while, and for him, it's the win. He's got a guy in Trevor Whitman who's taken that chaos, and he's now turned into controlled chaos, which is the scariest thing you could do when fighting Dustin Gaethje. So for me, let's just get the win here, lay a little bit more juice, and for me, that's how we're going to roll.
Yeah, a little bit of a long layoff here for Dustin Gaethje, which I don't think is going to be an issue with what he puts himself through for every camp. And
sure.
He always said he wouldn't take short notice fights because he has to put himself through the right type of camp. He knows how to get his body ready for these types of fights. The layoff, not concerning for me, but it is worth mentioning that Gaethje has not fought in over a year. Let's look at Shane Burgos versus Billy Corantillo. Shane Burgos, love watching the guy fight. Still feel like he's kind of putting it all together. Still needs to get over that hump and really find that consistency level. And then you got Billy Q, who's just another fun guy in this 145-pound division, can give anybody a tough fight. The odds reflect that. Burgos is a favorite, but he's only minus 195. What do you think about the line in this one?
I think the only reason why Shane Burgos is really a heavier favorite than expected is because of the level of competition. After his fight against Maricani, you saw he was on his back for a little while, and then his cardio is what got him the win. But then he fights a guy in Josh Emmett, tough loss, and then the Edson Barboza. I've never seen a knockout happen like that where it was delayed, and it's kind of concerning that he is coming back as quick as he is. Billy Q is an absolute animal here. The cardio, that last fight against Gabriel Benitez, his striking so improved. He keeps getting better and better. He's not just a grappler with cardio. He can threaten everywhere. For me, this is my underdog play of the entire night right now. I think Billy Q, if he's able to get Shane Burgos on his back and steal that first round, can withstand the power. And I just don't know how much more Burgos can take damage-wise. So for me, minus 190 is not the way to go. Plus 160, Billy Q.
Yeah, that early start is going to be key. I want to see what happens that first time Billy locks up with him.
Oh, yeah.
And you see what happens in the grappling. Because if it's a stand-up fight and Shane starts to find his rhythm and the crowd gets into it, he's a crowd pleaser.
He is.
The energy starts picking up, then you're going to be worried about this Billy Q bet. But if he can seize momentum early, I'm going to love having plus money on him. So then let's move on to Frankie Edgar versus Cheeto Vera. Cheeto Vera, man, he's another guy. I love watching this guy fight. I think the last time I was watching him fight, I just tweeted, just appreciate Marlon Vera, man. He's just so much fun to watch. And Frankie Edgar, of course, a legend, been around forever. Says he's still going strong, still no plans of retiring. He is a small favorite here at plus 130. Are you surprised at all by this line? Do you think it's correct? And which way are you ultimately landing?
You know what? Cheeto was a bigger favorite early in the week. Someone's either loves Frankie Edgar or they see a style problem here, and I kind of agree a little bit. Look, Cheeto is known for starting off slow. right? He's a little hesitant, counter, sits on his back foot a little bit too much, and Frankie Edgar goes at a ridiculous pace. If Frankie Edgar doesn't get caught, I think this is going to be a 3-round war for me. I was leading Cheeto in the beginning, but then I'm like, you know what? 3 rounds. Frankie Edgar's the Energizer Bunny. He doesn't stop. He doesn't get hit that often. So for me, I think this fight goes the distance at -150 because, look, Frankie did it against Pedro Munoz. He went to a decision. He was able to avoid the power and the grappling. And for me, Frankie, listen, we know how Frankie does it. And to your point, Jersey, New York, he's going to have a huge crowd here. Look, whoever wins, I think this is going all 3 rounds.
Sure, yeah, and these guys are 2 veterans. They settle into the fight. 15 minutes can go pretty quickly, I feel like, with these 2. Well, let's get to these 2 title fights. Let's start with the strawweight rematch. Zhang Weili taking on Rose Namajunas. We all remember how the first fight went. It was over pretty quickly. Never really got settled into the fight. Rose took care of business, proclaimed herself, "I am the best," and then one of the most adorable post-fight speeches of all time. And now we're going to do it again with Halle Berry looking on Rose Namajunas taking on Weili Zhang. And Rose Namajunas closing odds in title fights. Let's take a look here. They've all been pretty close. If you picked her to beat Joanna Jędrzejczyk to win the championship the first time, you were a very happy man, happy woman that night, plus 350. Other than that, the odds have been pretty close. And right now, believe it or not, Rose Namajunas is a slight underdog to repeat against Zhang Weili. And with that, we will welcome in UFC analyst and light heavyweight Anthony Smith to help us break down this fight. Again, as I mentioned, we saw the way the first fight went. Did you learn anything from that first fight? And what are you anticipating for this second matchup?
I think that's what makes this fight so interesting to me. I personally believe that Rose is the better fighter, but we don't have any actual proof of that. We all know how fighting is. The better fighter doesn't always win. It was so fast. I think that's what's drawing me to this fight is I really want to find out who the better fighter is, and I don't think that just because Rose won by knockout so quickly, I don't think we actually know.
Ian, I mentioned, man, she's the underdog. Does that surprise you? And why is she the underdog?
I mean, I think she's the underdog only because, to Anthony's point, we didn't see a whole lot. I think because we didn't see that much, people are still going off the same analysis that Zhang Weili's got the power. We've seen what she's been able to do in a 5-round fight. Not that we haven't seen with Rose, but now you got Zhang Weili also training with Henry Cejudo, so you know there's going to be some grappling, some wrestling in there, and cardio's never been an issue. If you don't see that high kick happen, then where does this fight go? Because Zhang Weili was doing pretty well with the striking. Do I think that she should be the favorite right now? I don't. I think that's a little disrespectful to Rose being the champ and how she finished the fight, but we're going to find out. So whichever way you're leaning, you're getting good odds either way.
Anthony, from a betting perspective, what interests me about this fight is that I just wonder if we're making too big of a move. And when I say that, I did mention it's a little surprising to see Namajunas as the underdog, a slight underdog, but she went into the first fight as a pretty significant underdog. So are we just kind of falling in love with, hey, she landed that head kick, and now, assuming that things have changed when they really haven't? What were your thoughts going into the first fight? Did you expect Weili to win the first time?
You know what? To be very honest with you, I didn't. Every time I look at fights and we talk about betting, I just go back down to the details of the actual competition. Rose is obviously, at least in my opinion, when I'm breaking them down and I'm trying to figure out who's better and where, Rose is the more technical fighter. Like, Weili is high-paced, she's super powerful, she's aggressive, she's really mean, but Rose is just the more technical fighter, and that's what I always try to lean on. And she's tough. I know that Weili's training with Henry Cejudo. I think there's going to be some wrestling. On the flip side of that, Rose is working with Greg Nelson, who's a fantastic catch wrestling guy. They've had a long relationship with the Whitman crew. So I think that those two things are going to kind of play into each other a little bit. I don't think that just because she has Henry Cejudo gives her an edge on the ground, because I think Rose is making a similar adjustment in that area.
Do you like the idea of her switching her camps right before a 5-round championship fight?
No, I don't at all. When you switch gyms, you end up in these situations where you have your old stuff that you do, your old tendencies and habits, and then you're going to start mixing all the new stuff that you do. I've done it myself personally. Fortunately, there was already a big enough skill gap. I was able to kind of just figure it out on the fly, and I was okay. At the highest level of the division in a 5-round title fight, there's not that skill gap where if it's not working perfectly, like, this is a terrible spot to try something new.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting, because I think that she went to a good camp, and I like the move overall, but going into a championship rematch to one you just lost to, it's going to be interesting to see how that factors in. Okay, we've talked through the fight. What are you looking for at plays, Ian?
I'm a little scared to disagree with my guy to the left, especially my back face game. He may throw me in a choke before I even give an answer. You know, for me, I think the move with the camp was more based on travel, because last time when she fought, I think there was an issue with that with timing. Here, she's with a camp, I think for a reason, because this is where she beats Rose, in my opinion. Rose is great off her back, but the power, the strength, and her positioning on the floor with Zhang Weili, I think she's just there to really refine that and a little bit more of a better game plan. She also hasn't been someone who's been finishing, what, her last loss was 20 fights ago, so she's not really used to defeat. You know what? For me, if Rose keeps the distance and uses the angles and speed, she wins. If Zhang Weili could turn this into a grapple fest and steal rounds early on, which I think will happen, I think that's why Zhang Weili gets it done.
Okay, so you're going with Zhang Weili.
I am.
Against our guy Anthony, who...
terrifying, but yes.
Yeah, who's taking Rose Namajunas.
Different weight classes, but yeah, we're good.
I think we got to get to this main event here, right? Colby Covington taking on Kamaru Usman for the second time. It's a fight that Colby has waited a long time for. We saw it at the end of 2019. It's the closest fight that Usman has ever been in. This is still one of the craziest stats ever. Usman has lost 1 round in his entire UFC career. It was to Colby Covington. There's only been one time where all 3 judges thought Usman lost the round. That happened in December of 2019. And you look at the line here, minus 240 for Usman is where it opened, and now it sits at minus 310. So a lot of people thinking that it's going to be Usman again, this time potentially even more dominant than the first time. So I'll ask you first, Anthony. You know, obviously the first fight was terrific. What did you learn from the first fight, and what are you anticipating here?
You know, I just learned that these guys are just tough. I mean, that's it. I feel like they weren't fighting where they're the best. Obviously, they're wrestlers, and I think that those two things are going to cancel each other out, and they didn't even want to test each other in that area. So you had 2 wrestlers kickboxing, essentially. Now moving into this fight, I think one of those guys absolutely has gotten better. He's with Trevor Whitman. Kamaru Usman is a dangerous, dangerous man on his feet before Trevor Whitman, just with the natural power he was born with. Now you add in Trevor Whitman and his whole system that he's under now. Kamaru Usman, I go back to the competition side of it. I don't see where Colby Covington can win this fight. Is he going to grind out Kamaru Usman over 25 minutes? I just don't see that happening. Will he out-wrestle him in some exchanges? It's possible. Will he do it over the entirety of 25 minutes? I don't see that. When is the last time we've seen Colby Covington hit someone with a shot and starch them where they stood? I just don't see that happen. He's a volume guy. He's a pressure guy. I think all of those things Kamaru Usman can deal with, and he's got a lot more coming back at him.
If you're Colby, Anthony, and you're telling yourself, the way in which I fought that fight last time, I was 1 round away from winning it. So I'm going to do it again. I just got to do it better. Or do you say I got to switch things up? I got to change my game plan for this fight?
I think you got to switch it up. I think you got to switch it up because Kamaru's getting better. So even if Colby does believe, like he said several times, that was the worst, that was Kamaru Usman's best night and Colby's worst, now Kamaru's gotten much better. So Colby needs to be exponentially better at the same thing or change it. Try to wrestle a little bit. At least give him something else to look at. If Kamaru Usman has no threat of a takedown and no threat that Colby's going to try to push him up against the fence or grind on him or try to wear him down, he can throw freely, and that's a really huge problem to deal with. It doesn't matter if it's Kamaru Usman or any of these other guys on the card. If you can throw freely without the threat of a takedown, it makes your job that much easier.
Ian, when you're trying to handicap this fight, you know, Anthony's talking about how much better Kamaru Usman has been. Meanwhile, we've seen Colby once, and he was very dominant against Tyron Woodley, but he's also changed camps. So when you know that, and there's a little bit of this mystery factor to him, what does that do in terms of how you're trying to handicap?
You know what? You got to look where the style is here, and I think Anthony made the best point. Kamaru Usman has improved. We got a guy now who went from wrestling and grinding to be able to eat shots to someone who's now a threat on the feet. Colby's not going to starch him. He's not going to knock him out. He's going to touch him a lot, and we saw Kamaru Usman deal with that with Gilbert Burns. He got dropped, and then he came back, fought through adversity, and then with the Masvidal fight, went all 5 rounds, and the second time he got a knockout, and nobody has knocked out Masvidal ever until now. So for me, I think the odds are a little too wide. I understand why people may want to sprinkle it on Colby. You got 2-1, and he can grind it. But if he doesn't wrestle and it's a boxing match, how do you not favor Kamaru Usman? So for me, you know what? I like over 3.5 rounds here. I think this fight goes into the championship rounds because Colby Covington is also very difficult to finish. Last time before Usman was Warlley Alves in 2016.
Yep. Anthony, I want to get your thoughts on that. Do you see this going in the 4th round?
I really don't. I don't. You know, I think that the way that Kamaru Usman is fighting, at least these days and recently the last 2 or 3 fights, he seems like someone who's much more aware of what's going on around him. I don't know if anyone's ever had an opportunity to listen to Trevor Whitman corner.
Yeah.
The vision that guy has and the ability to make adjustments on the fly, it's exactly what happened in the Masvidal fight. He went from a fight where he grinded him out over 25 minutes, and then now they have the data. And they made that adjustment mid-fight, landed that, and that's the exact shot Trevor Whitman wanted. I think that that's going to happen super fast in this fight because Colby doesn't bring a lot of variety to the fight game. You know, we kind of know what we're going to get. Maybe he's got some new skills that he's learned since their last fight. But his game is what it is, right? So I think they're going to make a quick adjustment. I think he's going to land a big shot. I really do.
Man, I couldn't agree more. If they could just have an audio feed to Trevor Whitman's corner when he's in there, I would listen to it all night. So I cannot wait for that main event. And before we wrap things up, Ian, I know we got to get to your parlay. So we talked about every fight on the card. You've given out a lot of props, a lot of different over-unders, some picks. What are we putting together for a parlay tonight?
So we had to go into props because, as we talked about, the odds are too big on some of these favorites, but we do really like them. So here's what we are going to do. We are going to go with Dustin Jacoby, Ian Gary, Pereira, and then we're going to end it with Kamaru Usman. So we don't have to worry about that minus 300. We just need him to win, plus 189, and we're going to bring it home.
And in addition to the parlay, this guy's always showing off. He's got his best bets as well. 3 of them again today. What are we doing for the best bets of UFC 268?
We're going to start off. You know what? I like the opener. Ode Osborne. Let's take him minus 190. We're going to jump to Alex Pereira by TKO, KO, or DQ. Even what better at minus 110? Justin Gaichi again. Proceed with caution. Originally minus 185, now minus 210. And last but not least, in the main event, I do think Usman gets it done. And if he does get to finish again the later rounds, but for me, it's over 3.5.
All right, there you go. Ian Parker's best bets for UFC 268. I'm going to give the final word to Anthony Smith here. And you know what? I don't like doing this very often. This is a gambling show, but let's throw gambling to the side for a second. Do you see any titles changing hands this evening?
I don't. I think that the title's going to go home with their original owners. All
right, Kamaru Usman with the welterweight, of course, and Rose Namajunas with the strawweight. Kamaru Usman maybe with that BMF title as well. That is it for us at UFC 268, but we do this every week, myself and Ian. We do UFC Best Bets, so make sure you tune in to the show every week, and make sure you tune in to UFC 268 tonight. You got the early prelims starting at 6 Eastern on ESPN+. They move on 8 Eastern on ESPN and ESPN News, and then, of course, the main card, ESPN+ pay-per-view at 10 Eastern. That is it for us from Madison Square Garden. For myself, Anthony Smith, and Ian Parker, thank you for watching, and enjoy the fights this evening.